we don't like to wade into politics, or at least I don't on this show, but you are very excited about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
The ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign.
I am really excited. I've followed him and his Children Health Defense Fund for a long time, for a while now. Followed a number of his things that he's done in the community, in the environment, and I think that he's just got it really aligned well as far as what we need to do in the United States to make America healthy again.
This is the Be Well Now podcast. I'm Nick, the curious patient of Dr. Ron Dummar, and you're a functional medicine doctor here in Heber.
Yeah, I do functional medicine here in Heber, chiropractic physician, Chinese medicine doctor. We do a lot of fun stuff. General practice. We help a lot of people with a lot of conditions.
And for a couple of years, we've been doing this podcast, and I'm so passionate about all things natural health, and yet in preparing for this podcast, I watched mainstream media, which I used to be a part of, and I'm not here to even like denigrate the mainstream media, which anybody can do if they want. That's not even my position. But the way they talk about RFK and his approach to health makes him sound so fringe. And then I realized, well, maybe whatever you want to label things at, like maybe that's the way most people view him. And this is a fringe belief system. I don't know, but it was a really interesting lens into like, I believe in a lot of this stuff. And so I guess the lens that we're taking this podcast is like from a healthy perspective. We want people to be well now. And you think RFK will have a positive impact if Trump is elected? I guess, yeah, just share your thoughts on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and what you want people to know from your perspective.
Well, I think if you have the bully pulpit and you're the one who's administering the message and the messaging, that people will hear what it is, the message you're sending out. And I think if you asked most people, what is homeoprophylaxis, and is homeoprophylaxis an acceptable alternative or option for educating your immune system and or immunizing yourself against childhood immunizations or childhood diseases, majority of people would say absolutely no, that's a psychotic, weird, crazy idea.
Well, if you don't even know what that is, we did a podcast about that as a potential alternative to, or
it's a parallel track to
vaccines.
It's the way we like to say. Yeah. But essentially it's educating the body, right? So the point being though, is
that podcast is in the
you
description.
don't even know about that.
I didn't know anything about it.
And the question is why? Why? Because there are actually countries on Earth, there are countries throughout the world who use that as their mainstream mode of immunization in their country, right? So there's a legitimacy level to that, and you don't know about it. And the question is why? It's because people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do not have the bully pulpit, right? It's because we do not have a science that is open in this country to all discovery and questioning. There are certain things, unfortunately, that in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you can read a variety of his writings and his discovery on these topics. But the fact of the matter is, we do have a system that's set up in a way to defeat itself on the medical side.
So he's endorsed Donald Trump.
He has recently, he's come out and he's endorsed Donald Trump. Now, I would say when I was a kid, when I was younger, early voting years, I looked at this, I was thinking, man, it would be nice to see some of these guys go across the aisle. And we even hear talk about, they're reaching across the aisle, they're working together. And all of us, we think that that's a really beautiful, really great thing. And I became a registered unaffiliated a number of years ago. And the reason that I am registered unaffiliated is because I don't really align with a Republican mentality or a Democrat mentality. I think that their platforms are way too strong or aggressive, or maybe even potentially extreme in certain instances. And so I thought, how cool would it be to actually see someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. join a Republican ticket? And I've been thinking about that, and that would be really cool. And then all of a sudden, we started hearing tidbits about it happening earlier in the summer. And then all of a sudden, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says, hey, I actually have committed to the Trump team, and this is why. And he gave a list of reasons. And one of them is, he said he believes that he and Trump actually align on advocating for free speech. Also, the war in Ukraine and resolving that conflict. And then the war on children or on childhood disease and chronic disease in this nation. And so I think one of the areas specifically that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would fit really well into the Trump plan or politically is, maybe as Health and Human Services Secretary, so that he could help to root out a lot of the potential conflicts of interest that he sees occurring, where one of the things that I saw that turned me off of, let's say, George Bush. I was a big George Bush fan. I thought, I grew up in a very Republican state. I was influenced that way too. And I was a big George Bush fan. And then I started to notice around the Dodd-Frank time and era, they were using these people in government to push these bills through. And then some of the people from George Bush's cabinet who helped to work on these bills actually got multi-million-dollar jobs with pharmaceutical companies. And so there's like this revolving door of, you pass a bill for a pharmaceutical company, it has this language in it that's going to specifically benefit them, and then boom, you end up sitting on a board, or you sit on specific chairing a department, or you have some job where you're working with or through or for this pharmaceutical company. So to me, that seemed wrong. That feels like a conflict of interest to me, that if you are working on behalf of a certain organization, that you shouldn't also be pushing legislation that's going to benefit them.
And that seems like politics to me as much as it obviously seems like a conflict of interest. And, it's a dirty, dirty world. It's a dirty world. It's a dirty, it's a very, it's a high contact sport. I'm not getting the right words. We all know politics is dirty.
It is, but when politics gets into medicine, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for us to say, okay, well, that's just politics. Well, it's not just politics. Because what happens is
speaking,
yeah, but what happens is the decisions,
or the realist.
The decision, yeah, it is a realist.
Yeah.
But the decisions that are made as a result of that now flow down and they channel down into you and your doctor visit.
Well, I think what doesn't feel political to me is that, fluoride in the water, fluoride's a neurotoxin.
Yeah.
All these chemicals in food that my kids are eating, and it seems like just very normal to be eating these processed foods that are literally, I think, slowly in ways that are hard to define today, but long-term I feel like are poisoning my kids.
Absolutely.
Dirty air, right? So I feel like water, air, just trash that's poisoning, a lot of processed foods that the kids just eat regularly. That to me shouldn't be political, right? And I feel like RFK is probably speaking about this stuff and seems radical to folks. So I guess what does he represent that you think would be good for our kids' health?
Well, I think what RFK represents essentially is cleaning up our air, cleaning up our water, cleaning up our environment, cleaning up our food, getting chemicals. A lot of these chemicals are actually banned in Europe as well. Now, it's going to be interesting, and we have to come in with our real glasses on so that we have our eyes open as well, because this pairing is not necessarily like a match made in heaven. I think it's probably the best thing that Trump has maybe ever done, in my opinion. But also when you look at...
There are debates on whether it's going to have an impact or not.
Right, exactly. Well, and that also bears to whether it has an impact on him getting elected or whether it has an impact after, depending on where he's placed and what role he plays in the Trump cabinet, right?
Because didn't it seem like Kennedy had much higher polling numbers when it was the two old guys, right? The two old white guys, Trump versus Biden, and it was Kennedy offered this fresh alternative.
Correct.
Now Kamala's in
Kamala's, it's like new and fresh, and for sure. And it's going to be a battle down to the wire. And I'm not necessarily interested in. I don't know a lot about that. I think it's going to be a battle. I don't know a lot about that. I only know about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and what he's done in the past. And like you mentioned, the water. Like he's advocated. Throughout his career, he's advocated for a safe and clean environment.
Yep.
And for safe and clean food. And he's actually litigated for communities and helped benefit communities that otherwise were being they were being affected negatively because of leaking and contamination of their water supply.
Actually, as a cub reporter in West Virginia, covered him in a class action lawsuit in West Virginia.
Yeah,
I was 19 years old.
Uh-huh.
I had this giant news camera, and I covered one of those trials where he was doing that kind of work. And I remember he had that raspy voice, and minute 30 news story doesn't have a lot of time to explain a lot of things, but I remember trying to weave in a line about his condition so that, because people didn't really, you heard the Kennedy name, but you didn't know why his voice is raspy. But I remember meeting him, and I interviewed him for a story again when I was 19 years old in Clarksburg, West Virginia. So he's been representing.
Yeah, he's been doing this his whole career. He's been consistent. He's consistent. Now, do he and Trump see eye to eye? No, but that's the whole point. I don't know anybody that really sees eye to eye in everything, right? There are things that you agree on and things that you disagree on, but that's been the whole problem with our entire political system, is that it's this polarization. And now for the first time, I mean, this is a really big move, not just because of who he is and the fact that he's represented the type of cases and people that he has throughout his history, but also because his entire family has been Democratic. They're like the Democratic machine, like they funding Democrats in huge, huge ways, right? And now he reaches across the aisle and says, okay, I can get behind this if we do these things, right?
And again, the politics of this are interesting. Maybe we could talk about some of the things that really align with your belief on health. Right? You put a bullet point list of these, which I'm really glad you did.
Yeah, so I have a few things. One of the things that you mentioned and we talked about before too is the advocacy of clean water, right? So the fact that he advocates for clean water, we've done episodes on water. And I
think about it every day.
Yeah. And so it's like the EPA is responsible for that. So it's like, well, that's an interesting area that Kennedy could actually be over the EPA. Would that be a benefit to our nation, do you think, if he's involved with that? I mean, I personally think that that's a really good thing. But he's worked with organizations like Natural Resource Defense Council and the Waterkeeper Alliance. And he's won a number of legal battles to help keep our water clean. He's a proven case study, right? We're not just talking about somebody who's saying, I'm going to give you clean water. I'm going to give you clean air. Like, he's known how to do it. He knows the buttons to push, the levers to pull, right? And so that's why I'm excited about it. Because for the first time, I have patients who they go to Europe, right? They go to Europe and all of a sudden they can eat whatever food they want to and have no issues.
Not gluten, whatever. Yeah,
and no issues. Okay, there's a problem. And the problem is that there's contamination in our food supply. We're being poisoned to some degree, right? That's the premise. And so if we can access that and have somebody who has a level of intelligence and understanding, his whole career has been built on that. He can get in there with some judicial authority in some sense and be able to say, hey, let's put our finger on the scale and make America healthier by giving us access to cleaner food and cleaner water, right? One of the things that Kennedy, you'll hear him talk about, he's been mentioning this a lot recently, is there is and we did a podcast about this as well. You can go back and listen to it. But Ozempic, remember Ozempic?
Yep.
So this is like,
it seems like more and more people are coming out as it becomes more popular about just the side effects of it. Like,
oh yeah.
So I saw someone's like, a lot of Ozempic patients are just feeling nauseous all the time. They're in the bathroom. They're like, I talked to a friend who's on it, and he's like, just a couple times a day, I just get incredibly nauseous. But otherwise, like, I'm loving that I'm losing weight.
Yeah, my GI doesn't work, but other than that, I'm doing great, right? It's like, okay, you have these. There are a lot of issues, and this isn't really to talk about that.
Okay, Ozempic, I interrupted you.
But Ozempic is definitely one of those medications that is about ready to take off. An interesting thing about the Ozempic is that it's made by a Swedish company. It's like Nordisk is who it's made by. But it's not allowed or permitted to be sold in the country in which that company is.
No way.
Yeah, they don't even allow them to sell that for weight loss or obesity. It's not permitted. So they're banking their entire production of that drug on selling it in the United States. Okay? So take just a moment and say, here's a company, not in our country. They produce a product, And it's not allowed or permitted in their country, but they think they're banking on making enough money with the shipping and carrying it and sending it over, everything, right? They're banking on making enough money that it won't matter. They're going to make their entire, pot of gold on the United States. What does that say about us? Should we look into that drug? Why is Kennedy's it that they're not doing it, right? So Kennedy, what Kennedy says is he's like, look at the cost of this drug, right? This is what he's saying. And this is why I like his approach with this. He says the cost of the drug is $800 to $1,200 a month. And that's really what it is. Okay. If you add that up, the number of people that are soon to be on Ozempic, right? But you add up the cost of that, we could actually buy people fresh, organic food, right? We could give them a stipend to do fresh, organic food and produce every month that they would need, which actually would solve the problem. And the issue is that Ozempic isn't solving the problem. It's a medication that you really have to be on for life. Some people will say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get on this and just temporarily reduce it and then get off. And if you can do that, that's great. But what we're seeing is that a lot of people are rebounding.
Really?
Yeah, they're actually getting rebounding. And especially if you don't stick, we talked about the importance of working out and doing your fitness training and everything as well. And if you're not doing that, and if you don't change your lifestyle, you don't change the food, the quality of food that you're consuming, you just all of a sudden go off of it, boom, you're going to rebound and you'll be right back where you were and possibly even worse. So what would be better for us to do? What would be a better investment? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says, wouldn't it be better for us to invest in quality food? To take that money that we're giving to a foreign pharmaceutical company, right, to the tune of billions, right? If we, instead of giving them that, why don't we put that money into our food, into our population, and help America be healthy again?
But we're all about freedom of choices. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Well, we're not about freedom of choices because it's very hard to access quality food and clean water.
Yeah.
So the harder that is to access, the less choice you really have. And the less you know about options, which is the point we made at the beginning, the less you're really offered a choice. So you may live in what you believe to be the greatest country in the world with the greatest access to the greatest healthcare, but your healthcare might not be really what you think it is, which is also why when you look at the World Health Organization, the United States is ranked 39th out of the top 40 developed nations in the world as to the health of their citizens. Okay, so we're ranked 39 out of 40. I would think we'd be at least in the top 10. We can't even get into the top 10. And that, you don't tell me that's just because of people's choices, just because they want to eat sugar or just because they want to eat certain foods or drink alcohol. You don't think people in Europe do that also? And throughout the world? Of course they do. But they don't have crap and poisons in their food, right? They're not allowing additives and dyes and flavorings that is completely allowed in ours. There's hundreds of chemicals, known toxins that are not allowed in Europe that are allowed in our food supply.
And you think
you think Europeans don't like to party? You think they don't like to eat good food? You think they don't like to enjoy life? Is that what you're saying to me? That's the explanation we get from these quote unquote scientific research professionals. Well, it's lifestyle choices. Bull crap. It is not. It is not. So the reality is people have to sit down and look at it and say, why am I overweight? Why am I sick? Why am I tired? Is it partially because of my own choices? Yes, I can get up. I can make a difference. But the fact of the matter is, what are the majority of foods? Like it's food stamps. Food stamps. The number one food used to purchase or used for food stamps, the number one food purchased with a food stamp is soda.
So what you're saying here is it's bigger than individual choices.
Yes.
There's a bigger system at play that you think this one individual added to a mainstream ticket could have an influence on. That's why you're excited about it.
Well, yeah. Here's another thing that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying is that
because there isn't really a voice. Like this feels like a very niche podcast we have. I know there's a big crowd. Like if you look at the numbers of folks who are interested in natural health online.
Yeah.
But the big names take up all the real estate. Like we basically don't exist. And it feels like, but I know that we do. I just look at like the broad swath of humanity
Sure.
and the billions of people in the world. have a few million views for us. Why not? Like, let's make an impact. And, we get a few dozen listens, maybe 100 per podcast. And so for me, I'm like, is anybody listening? Is anybody resonating?
Yeah.
And I know they're out there. You got
to be out there, and we're reaching to you.
There's more of you out there.
We want you to care about your health. I want you to care about your health.
I love how fired up you are today, because I can feel it.
We want to be passionate about health. I think it's important for people to be concerned about it. It's like, if you don't care about your health, who's going to care? Like, no one else is going to care about your health. This is an individual thing for us all to do together, right?
I'm fighting off a little cold, by the way.
Yeah, you're fine. I want to help you. I want to coach you.
Yep.
But it's like, what happened when the tobacco industry no longer could advertise on TV? What happened? Do you know what happened? Do you know what the tobacco industry, the tobacco companies did? They bought up food companies. They bought food companies. Okay? And so then what they did is they applied the science that they had implemented in tobacco. How do we make people consume more of this? How do we make them addicted to this? You look at the research, it's not actually the nicotine really that people are addicted to. It's the chemicals that are in the cigarettes. That's what people get addicted to. It's not the nicotine. Okay? There's lots, you can get nicotine patches, you can do all sorts of things. It's not the nicotine.
Nicotine is addictive though, right? You see people on these Zyn patches, like they're addicted.
It's chemicals.
Okay, there's also chemicals in those.
It's the chemical mixture, right? And I'm telling you, the tobacco industry spent lots and lots of research. They brought in all the best scientists they could to discover how could they get people to consume more of it. And what is happening with our food now? There are foods, what do people say? You can't just have just one. That's like a slogan. And people are like, hey, man, that means it's good. Well, it means it's toxic also, right? Maybe it means it's chemically filled with substances, like we've talked about gustatory reactions on the tongue and excitotoxins that impact neurology and cause ADHD and other sort of neurological related inflammatory disorders. Maybe this is actually what's really happening. Okay, maybe our food has been filled with certain chemicals that are designed to have us want to have more of it. And also throughout that process, it's been stripped of all of its nutrients and enzymes. There's no real nutrients in there, but we feel like we're getting something, but we always need more of it because we're never really getting the full swath of the nutrient that the original food from the source, the ground, would give you. So we need to return back to the whole organic, farm to table, getting our food from a direct source, knowing where it's from, knowing what's in it, knowing the ground and the soil that it came from. And if we can do that, we'll get healthier on our own without any drug. Our body will do it. Just like I get a cut and it heals.
You know what? How as woo-woo as that just sounded, what in life that is worth anything is easy.
Right.
If there's something worth putting effort into, isn't it that? The fuel, knowing where your food comes from. I know it costs money, but like, so does chronic disease.
Let me just say this one more time.
Right.
Think of Europe. Think of Europe. Okay. Remember we talked about Europe. Europe, do you think they like to party? Of course. Yeah, they like to party. They like to have fun. They like to enjoy things, right? And, look at the health related issues in Europe compared to here, right? Look at these other countries, okay? We're constantly comparing our country to the other countries. And there's a reason for that. It's because we spend more. We spend way more on healthcare, almost than the entire globe in our country. We spend more in healthcare, and we're among the sickest of nations, okay? So listen to this. 28% of American adolescents between the ages of 12 and 19, 28%, 30%, right? They have prediabetes, with type 2 diabetes accounting for more and more rising rates of obesity, okay?
28%?
That's a 12-year-old, 12 to 15, right? 12 to 19 is what I said. So 50 to 60 years ago, how many type 2 diabetes cases do you think there were?
I don't know. You're throwing a lot of numbers at me. I don't know.
Almost zero. Like doctors would see like one maybe
what's the culprit?
In their entire career, right? So
processed foods, soda. Yep, it's nutrient depleted foods, chemical rich foods, and nutrient depleted foods. That's what we need. I mean, that's what we need. That's why we need to turn back and go to whole foods,
from the ground, from the earth, getting nutrient-dense foods, and making sure we're using raw organic approaches to doing it. So young adults, this is another interesting
We're talking
thing.
about a lot. What about Kennedy? What happened to him? Did we finish all this stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just sharing.
Okay.
I think did we talk about Kennedy enough? Do we need to talk about him some more?
Well, I like the fact that when we first
one of the big
podcast,
things about Kennedy is that his big thing.
he promotes holistic health practices. That was your third note, and I wanted to make sure we touched on that because you're riffing. I like it.
Okay, sorry.
But you're on a roll.
Very, very good. He does his promotion of natural health. He's always,
which is what we're about.
Yeah, he's always been an advocate for natural health. And
isn't he on TRT?
I think he is actually.
He's a pretty good looking dude for how old he is, though. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty ripped. Like,
I think he is, and we've talked about that. Like, your choices in general. We're not anti-vax. We're not anti-drug. We're not anti-medication here, but we are open eyes. Like, go in with your eyes open. Make sure you have as much knowledge as possible, and be the decision maker. Like, you be the decision maker. And what I find, majority of my patients that come into me, they're coming in because they want to. They're working their way with their provider off of medication. They're wanting to wean off of it. They need nutritional support, and I'm supporting them through that process, right? So we want to be able to have the options. Now, with Kennedy and Trump, one of the great things that, interestingly, that Trump did, and where Kennedy and Trump seem to align, is in this same area where Trump actually did a bill called Right to Try. And what that does is it enables an individual to be able to try something that might not be FDA approved, right? If, say, they're on, they're terminally ill or something. It's like, hey, they want to try something that's may not be FDA approved. Okay, great. Well, now you have the right to do it. That seems pretty logical that we should have that right? We should expect the American public and the American individual to do their research and to provide as much research and knowledge about certain things as possible, as opposed to just saying, bad, this is bad, this is good. We need to be able to say, why am I making this choice? Why am I making this decision? And Kennedy is aligned right on that as well with him. So we want to be able to open more options for people to be able to understand how to get metabolically healthy, not less, not fewer. And on his point as well, we certainly are not struggling right now with a deficiency of medication in this country. We consume, I think, 70% of the world's medications. I think the number is actually higher than that, but I'm saying 70% because I want to be conservative.
And I keep thinking about like what's in the water, people flushing birth control and pills down the toilet, like all this stuff that ends up in our water that kind of gets filtered out, but does, it's like, anyway, that's just, I don't know if that's factual or just me worrying about things.
No, that is actually factual, because it's like, does it really all get filtered out through our water processing? What type of medications could you actually be taking just by drinking municipal water?
Yeah. Whether it's people flushing it down the toilet or excreting it, right? Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
yeah. So
do we have an answer on that?
I don't right now. I do not. We could do a podcast on that. That sounds good.
All right. Where are we in the, because you have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I think I wanted to move on to where I jumped into was the chronic disease, because one of the big things for both of them, and what I like is Trump was always like, hey, it should be your choice. Even when it came down to the vaccine, you guys remember everything around the vaccine with COVID, and he said, well, it should be a choice. It should be a choice that a person can choose to do it or not to do it. And it seemed to flip really quickly to where all of a sudden you were shamed, you were excoriated, you were told you had to lose your job. In fact, there's a variety of you can look at a variety of cases now where even soldiers and troops are being given back pay. They're being reinstated.
Wow.
Yeah, and because cases have gone through and they've been found to be on the winning side essentially here, I guess, or the appropriate side, where they should not have been treated that way. They should not have been given the choice of get vaccinated or get out.
Yeah.
Right?
There was a high point, I think, of hysteria.
Yeah, it definitely got heightened. But we don't want to get back into that place. We don't need to get back into a place of there's only one way. There isn't only one way, right? We need to be able to have options. We need to know that medication is an option, a vaccine is an option, homeoprophylaxis is an option, natural immunity is an option. These things are all options. They're all options, but we need to make sure we're making our choices with wise, sound judgment and information. So what does our government need to do? Not pull information away from us, not censor, not take it away, but give us more. Give us the information. Tell us, let us decide between this option, between natural immunity, between homeoprophylaxis, and between vaccination, right? And it becomes, when you're at the government level and you pour billions of dollars, you invest billions of dollars ahead of the fact. I mean, imagine you're a pharmaceutical company. You don't have to go to each individual now. Like, think about with drugs, like medications. They have to go and try to sell those to either the doctors or they have to sell them directly to the consumer, right? That's 320 million plus people, right? But with a vaccine, you only have to sell to one person. You only have to sell to one person. And then that one person approves the taxpayer expenditure to be to the tune of billions of dollars of taxpayer money to be dumped into pharmaceutical pockets. And then they have all that product. Well, then what does government agency want to do with the product they just invested in? They want to get it into the arms. It's not like they're going to be like, oh, hey, we'll just sit on all this. So there's a lot of maybe unseen pressure there. And,
sure.
And
money's involved.
Yeah. And Kennedy is aware. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is aware of those pressures. And I think that he has the best chance, in my opinion, of anybody. He's been talking about it for years. He has the best chance to be able to impact our health, literally as a nation, than anyone else. We need to get processed foods out of our diet as much as possible.
And
or at least we need to go ahead.
The rise in processed foods and all these chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, you really think public health interventions and policy changes are where this happens? It's not just people like you and me saying processed foods are bad.
Well, we've been saying it for a long time.
Yeah. And the idea is,
I think it's both.
Yep.
I think it's both. But maybe we have an educational piece to help the government, right? Maybe we have an educational piece to do. But the fact of the matter is, the government has a piece of education as well. Like if you want people to make a choice, educate them. Like allow them the choice. That's how it should be. It shouldn't be that you have to do this because. It's always a sales pitch, right? It shouldn't be a sales pitch. Everyone goes to the doctor and they feel like their only options are drugs or surgery. That's just not the case. That's just not the case. Drugs and surgeries are not your only option ever. That is, they are an option, but it's not the only option.
If folks want to know more about those other options,
yeah,
Community Health and Wellness in Heber, how do they get a hold of your office to maybe schedule an in-person or a virtual consult if they're not local?
Well, so you can call our phone number, 435-657-3696, or you can reach out at chwheber.com. You can find us there as well. But a final note is that we will help as many people and anyone who is interested in overcoming chronic disease and getting metabolically healthy. If we simply help Americans get metabolically healthy, and this is why I'm so passionate about this, and this is why I like the fact that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has done what he did. I think kind of turning away from this history of his family on some level, being Democrats for so long, and being able to say, okay, I'm willing to do this. I think there may be other self-interests in there, but at least one for certain is the fact that there's a selflessness that says, I've been working for something my entire career, and I want to see it be fulfilled on a bigger scale, which essentially is making America healthy again.
thank you for tuning in again to the Be Well Now podcast. Thank you, Dr. Dummar.
Be well now, everyone.
Be well now.
Namaste.
Namaste.